What's good, YouTube? It's MLS Digest coming at you from an unusual location. We're in a hotel room on the east coast of Florida, avoiding the hurricane that's happening right now if you've been paying attention to the news. So, yeah, just not my ideal setup here, but I really wanted to get this episode out for all of you guys who continuously tune in. I really appreciate that. And, yeah, we're here for week 34. Most teams only have about 4 games left to play. And despite that, this league is so forgiving that 27 out of the 29 teams still have a chance at qualifying for the playoffs. Obviously, some already have qualified, but only 2 teams, that is, are eliminated altogether. And week by week, more are going to drop out. It's really getting serious here, but that's just how forgiving this league is, like I said. And there's still a lot to play for. Last week, week 33, we had another loaded slate. Miami dropped points again with a draw to NYCFC on the road. Last-ditch corner tied it for NYCFC. And Miami's still obviously front runners and looking like obviously they're going to get that supporter shield, but it gets a little trickier for if they want to really go for it and get the points record, because now it's basically like they almost have to win out. They also have a game with the Crew coming up in about a week and a half time after this week 34 game they have. So we'll see how they take it, how seriously they take the remainder of this schedule, but they're only really a win or so away from the shield, depending on other results. So yeah, they get back at home this week. Charlotte, in the meantime, last week got back on track at home, 4-0 against the Revs, who are kind of self-destructing. They have been all year, but it's not good when your captain Carles Hill is kind of fighting with your own players. They kind of had another situation where they thought they were hard done by a no call for a pen they wanted, and then that kind of just unraveled into more and more goals for Charlotte once they got up. And then Red Bulls in Atlanta, in a kind of unexpectedly high-scoring game, that was 2-2. They drew. Columbus played Orlando. That was an interesting test for Orlando, who had been beating up on a lot of weaker teams and obviously was sitting in 4th ahead of that game in the East, climbing out of a deep hole they dug themselves. But the Crew came out, got the first goal, and then dominated. They went up 3-0, but they did not make it easy after that. They kind of maybe switched off a gear, and partially Orlando as well, just staying in it. The Crew ended up winning 4-3, so not the easiest result to see out. Credit to Orlando there for making it tough. They've definitely turned a corner, but the Crew, once again, just a little bit obviously in that higher echelon of teams, especially in the East. And then Montreal getting back-to-back wins now. They have a pretty good schedule. I'm not high on them. I said I wasn't high on them to make the playoffs, but they do have a pretty good schedule here in the past couple weeks, the teams they played. And now this coming week, they're going to play San Jose at home. So, but anyways, they beat the Fire 2-0 last week to get themselves still in that mix for those final playoff spots in the East. And then Minnesota continue their pretty decent form with a 2-0 win on the road against Kansas City, and that eliminated Kansas City for good. Big blow for them. And then Nashville and Cincinnati played out to a 2-2 draw. LAFC's terrible form recently continued with another loss, 3-1 on the road for FC Dallas against LAFC. And then the Dynamo getting revenge against Austin in the Texas Derby with a 1-0 result on the road. Austin had beat Dynamo twice this year by that same scoreline. So good for the Dynamo. They're staying in the mix for that home playoff spot as well. That's a really tight race right now for that in the West. And then the Rapids, they handled business against a traveling Toronto side. They beat them 2-0 with a late pen as well by Mihailovic. St. Louis City with their first away win as well against the Earthquakes of all teams, of course. Who else could you possibly get against when you've been that bad on the road? And because of that, they are literally hanging on by the thinnest of threads for the playoff spots. Minnesota, who's in that 9th spot right now, they would need Minnesota to, I'm pretty sure, not even get 1 point in the remainder of their 4 games, and St. Louis City has to win out their all 4 games. So let's just be honest, that's not going to happen, right? Considering St. Louis City's defensive problems, you would just think Minnesota, it's not like they're playing all the hardest teams or best teams to close out the schedule. So, but still, mathematically, St. Louis is still alive because of that road win. And then Galaxy continuing their basically impeccable home form. They beat the Whitecaps 4-2 at in Carson. And then the Union separated themselves for that 9th spot against DC United in that Sunday game. They beat DC 4-0. And with another win against Atlanta this weekend, they could basically essentially lock up one of those couple wildcard spots at the very least and distance themselves from the rest of that pack. And just to make mention of both of those packs, in the East, the number 4 and 7 seed are separated by 3 points. So 4 teams vying for that 4th and final home playoff spot still. And then numbers seed 8 through 13 in the East are also separated by 3 points. It's still absolute madness. No one is completely safe yet in terms of a specific seed. And then obviously all those teams actually just fighting to get into the playoffs at all. And then in the West as well, Galaxy still number 1. But then from the 2 to 7 spot, that's separated by just 5 points. So, like I said, still so much to play for. And it's going to get really, really interesting down the line here. And with so many playoff spots up for grabs nowadays with the way the system is, that makes more games, I guess, meaningful towards the end of the season with more teams getting more chances. Probably shouldn't be getting them, though. A lot of bad teams probably going to get into the playoffs, or especially in those wildcard spots. But regardless, let's move on to what happened midweek. We had 3 kind of championship games midweek. First, we start with kind of the more made up or least important, let's say, of the 3 with the Campeones Cup. Crew playing Club America in Columbus, and that one goes to penalties straight away after a 1-1 draw in normal time, and Club America gets out with a win. And then we had the Canadian Championship Whitecaps three-peat now after a 0-0 result in normal time, and then it went straight to pens, I think, as well. Bernadeschi actually missed a pen for Toronto in regular time, so not a good look there for a Toronto side that's already slipping up in league play and has, I think, 1 less game in hand than most other teams behind them playing for those final wildcard spots in the East. So congrats to the Whitecaps. And then we had the U.S. Open Cup final as well, LAFC hosting Kansas City. And that was basically KC's last hope at anything this season, especially obviously silverware. And they made it tough. It was 1-1 after 90 minutes. LAFC definitely not their best performance, but KC just kind of ran out of gas, and LAFC ended up winning 3-1 to capture their first Open Cup in the team's history. So congrats to them. KC now, season's over, basically can't qualify for the playoffs. Very emotional high and low there to give themselves a chance, but end up coming up short. So that's what happened midweek. And now we're looking ahead to week 34, obviously, here in MLS. We got another 14-game slate. In terms of the best bets, we got 3 here, another 2-unit. We cleaned up last weekend with a sweep. Back-to-back weeks now, including that midweek before that, where we've just been on fire. So hoping to keep that going. But regardless, we're getting into every of the 14 games, what to look out for, who's in and who's out, obviously. And yeah, just all the storylines. So let's get into week 34. So Cincinnati hosts LAFC to start out the slate. Cincinnati unbeaten in their last 4 MLS matches, 2 wins and 2 draws, but they did just get held to a draw on the road to a very poor Nashville side. Acosta, though, good sign for him that he gets back on the score sheet with a beautifully placed goal off the left post. And that's going to be crucial, his health especially, and just his form to kind of carry the Cincinnati team a little bit. Obviously, it's more than just him, but it seems like some of the strikers specifically have been on a bit of a carousel and haven't been fully in form, so to speak. LAFC on the other end, they had the midweek game Open Cup in LA that they obviously won, and now it's an emotional high to come off that and turn that around for now normal MLS play, in which they've been very, very poor recently. 5 winless now since coming back for MLS from Leagues Cup, 3 losses and 2 draws. And specifically now coming off that 3-1 loss to Dallas. And they're going to have to travel here again. They've been traveling a lot, specifically between LA and Texas. They played Dynamo at home, then had to travel right after that to play Dynamo on the road. Then they had to go back to LA for the Austin game, and then they had to travel back for the Dallas game, now travel back to LA for this midweek game, and now they have to travel to Cincy all the way east. So, that's going to be a lot of strain. It's good for them though that Christian Oliveira came back finally after a leg injury, so he featured in that Open Cup. So if they want to rotate a little bit here, then he should definitely be an option. Especially they've been lacking that kind of right wing depth since I think David Martinez, the young kid, got injured the other game. So it's gonna be interesting how they come out. It's kind of a hard one to read. Cincinnati has gotten much healthier, especially on the defensive end, especially with their new signings meshing a little bit more. And this is going to be one where I think LAFC also has that extra game in hand, but they do kind of need to do something with it because they have slipped up and now they're fourth in the West. So I think this is one that is a little bit cagey, and LAFC might set up a little bit, deeper, not more towards their style where they don't have the ball a lot. But it's kind of hard to read this one from a result standpoint. Cincinnati should be on the front foot here, but they, I just don't think they're still yet in that top form. So for me, I think this is a little bit on the lower scoring end. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. DC United hosting the Crew, and this is going to be our first best bet of the show. I'm taking Crew team total over 1.5 at -125. I mean, this is just the price you really shouldn't be offering very much, especially for this Crew team, but I understand it in a sense because of the situation. Obviously, Crew had the midweek game at home against Club America for that Campeones Cup, and so they're going to be on a little less rest here. Not too much of travel, but I think this is a spot I'm comfortable with taking. I think Crew obviously went full strength for that Campeones Cup game, and before that, the two previous game, Cucho only played 45 in each game before that, so 45 minutes. So I think that was obviously intentional to get him fully fit for the midweek game, but I don't think that means he, completely misses out on this game, or if he does, maybe he just plays the second half. So I'm not, I can definitely see why the odds in general across the board are the way they are. Crew is on the short rest. They haven't been as dominant on the road, obviously, but they still are one of the top teams in the East. And DC United as well. They're not in a position to just be keeping things too closed down. I think they are obviously also desperate. They just lost that game to the Union, who they were tied on points with for that 9th spot, and now they're 3 points behind them. So they know that the margin for error is very thin right now, and they do have to go for it. So as much as I just think that there will be goals in this game, I just would rather not trust the worst team in DC, because I think if they open up, Columbus will probably still play players like Rossi or Jackson or whoever you like. They just have the depth to still be a good attack on the road. But I still don't think that the Crew will over-rotate here. And I like my chances at just 2 goals. I think this could be a high-scoring one, like I said. I think like a 2-2 or something isn't out of the realm of possibility. But once again, I think this DC side, even at home, hasn't been very impressive. They've had, in their last 3, they're winless. One was against Mazatlan in the Leagues Cup. They lost 2-1. Then they shipped 4 to Dallas at Audi Field, and now their most previous game was a 1-1 at home to NYCFC. So obviously they're sitting in the position they're in for a reason, and they're going to be desperate. So I think this one has the potential for a lot of chances, specifically for the Crew. And I'm going to take my chances with just the overall better team, who is also still not in a position to take these final games lightly, since they are fighting for that second seed over Cincinnati, their rivals. And although they have a game in hand, they want to use it, obviously, to separate themselves and secure that spot. Miami slipped up again, like we talked about, against NYCFC. And now they need 10 points in their last 4 games, so 3 wins and a draw, to outright beat the New England Revolution for the new points record. New England had 73, and Miami would have to go for 74. So they could tie it and obviously still have that record, but it wouldn't be to themselves. So, yeah, obviously very little room for error here. And they start with Charlotte. And Charlotte hasn't been very impressive recently. They did turn it around, got a much needed win to recover from a very poor run of form and beat New England. But beating New England isn't that impressive. That doesn't change my mind again on what this Charlotte team really has been showing recently, which is, especially on the road, not as much defensive, structure or just, belief that they can hold clean sheets. And specifically, their attack has just been dried up. It's a good thing Aguiman came back and he subbed on, especially against the Revs, and got a couple goal involvements. And I think that's the number 9 they need to roll with if they want to make noise in the playoffs. But Miami specifically, their home form is just too strong to believe that, they're not going to pick up the 3 points here. They beat Charlotte on the road in this reverse fixture, and they have dropped a couple games in a row now, albeit on the road, a couple draws. I think they really want to get back in form here at home, but it remains to be seen what kind of lineup they put out, because Messi's been back. They've been starting him, but a couple other guys like Busquets, who for personal reasons has been out. A couple other guys have been injured, like Rojas, Gomez. Gomez might also be coming back for this one, so that's one to keep an eye out for. But yeah, it just remains to be seen if they really want to go for it. I think they can do it, but I think at the same time they maybe want to monitor some players' minutes, because they obviously are going to lock up this supporter shield no matter what. Really, it's just about going for that points record. Is it that important to them or not? Well, I guess we'll see when the lineups drop, but I think they'll go pretty full strength, and regardless, I don't think Charlotte poses too much of a threat. So I'm going to go for a 3-1 Miami win. This is one of the least watchable games on the watchability rating here between the Revs and Nashville. Revs in dead last in the East. They do have a game in hand on basically every other team, but that's been the case for a couple weeks now. And then they just keep dropping and dropping points. That 2-0 result that turned into 2-2 at home against Montreal was kind of a killer blow. Now they're coming off that 4-0 loss on the road to Charlotte, where Barrero got a red card. And they get a chance to redeem themselves against Nashville, who has been picking up steam in a sense. And they're sitting just outside that playoff spot, tied with a bunch of other teams on 33 points. And Schaffelberg's status is also questionable for this one. So attacking-wise, I do like the Revs more. It's just defensively, Nashville's been a little bit more solid just recently, and the Revs really can't be trusted. So this one's a coin flip as well. Revs did get the better of them in Leagues Cup. That did go to penalties, though. It was 1-1 in normal time. So I hate to do it, but I do think the Revs attack gets them through this one, despite the fact that maybe I'm not looking too much into the fighting within the team during the last game, but this is one that you really can't be confident with picking anything. So I'm just going to throw out the pick of the Revs to maybe make things a little bit more interesting in the bottom of the East and get the win. I say 2-1. We got the Hudson River Derby, and Red Bulls now hosting NYCFC. NYCFC got the better of Red Bulls in the last meeting, 2-1 over at Yankee Stadium, I believe. And for our second best bet, we're going to take a 2-legger. This is going to be the first leg of it, and we're taking the under 3.5 alternate. It's sitting at about minus 200 or so, and I really like this leg because Red Bulls just haven't been that creative at home or in general recently. In their last 15 or so games, like we talked about, they have like 10 draws. They're just draw FC. They got another one against Atlanta now at home. Forsberg is available for selection for the first time in like forever, but we'll see, how many minutes he plays. That could just influence and give them a little bit boost, but I just don't think he plays enough to get this, over, on the opposite side, over the line. And yeah, Red Bulls still one of the top 5 defensive teams. They have had a couple injuries, but still in this match, based on the positioning as well, Red Bulls want to hold on to that home spot. NYCFC just wants to hold on to not getting into the wild card spots. So I think this is going to be a very a lot of nerves surrounding this one. It's always a derby match, so it's going to be intense as always. And NYCFC as well, missing Santi Rodriguez due to suspension. So that's basically the key to all their attacking kind of chances. They're one of their main outlets. So it's really hard to trust NYCFC offensively anyways on the road. And without him, just completely takes me off them in terms of, being scared of that attack. So that's a big miss for them. Risa should be coming back on that back line for NYCFC, so that boosts their defensive, just their defense. And yeah, so we're taking that extra goal here to be a little safer. But I wouldn't be surprised if this goes under the 2.5. And yeah, like I said, Red Bulls getting Forsberg back, that could be a boost for just them getting a win finally, but I just don't expect to see fireworks in this one based with how many games are left, the positioning they're going for. I think these teams are just scared of dropping any points, and maybe one does find a winner, but I don't think this is one where we should be scared of fireworks. So that's going to be the first leg for this second best bet. For our second leg of the second best bet, we're going over to Minnesota taking on the Rapids. Minnesota could basically eliminate St. Louis here with any sort of points, but they also are trying to separate themselves from Dallas and Austin basically for these final wild card spots, and they've just been going at it, especially offensively. Yaboa now, their DP, who got signed at the end of the transfer window, now 5 goals in 5 games. I think 3 of those are penalties, so don't want to overreact, but he's been scoring goals, and that's been crucial to helping them climb out of this kind of fall they had after they started off the season so well. And Rapids on the other end, they're just picking up, especially home wins. Their home form has been so strong, but attacking wise on the road, they are a top 2 team in terms of expected goals. Both these teams both in the top 10 in just expected goals in general this entire season. So the attacks have been on completely on fire. Rapids still, they're sitting in third in the West. LAFC sitting in fourth with a game in hand, but regardless, they're in a prime position to hold on to one of these home playoff spots, and they've been obviously playing so well at home. So there's still so much to play for both of these teams. I think they're going to go full strength, and Minnesota as well. Not a great defensive team. I think I'm pretty sure they're bottom 10 in terms of expected goals allowed. So Minnesota as well, especially, is going to have to pretty much go for it. They obviously need maybe a couple more points or just a win to basically solidify their playoff spots. So I think the over 2.5 here, as you see for the second leg, is a good play. And yeah, that's going to basically wrap it up. We've seen the Rapids specifically, just to get on that note, with Vines out at left back, they brought in Reggie Cannon, who has kind of slotted in. He scored a goal in that last game for the Rapids against Toronto to give them the lead, and eventually they ended up winning 2-0. But yeah, Cannon slotted in there well. Obviously, they have their own defensive issues without Bombito. Abubakar did come back for that game, so that's a good sign for them. But regardless, I think this is one that the normal total is already 3.5. I think this game could get very out of hand in terms of just how many goals we might see. So we're just juicing it down a little bit. And with so little games left, I don't want to be doing too many, just pure 50-50 lines. I think there's definitely the potential for some cagier games, but I don't see that in this one. I see 2 attacks who are basically firing on all cylinders right now, and conditions should be good, and I think both should have no problem specifically contributing. So I don't see this being like a 3-0 or anything, but both teams should contribute, and that wraps up our second best bet. The Union host Atlanta. This is now Union's second home game in a row. Meanwhile, Atlanta's second road game in a row. Union beat DC 4-0 last week. Meanwhile, Atlanta almost stole 3 points on the road against the Red Bulls, but settled for a 2-2 draw. And this is who Atlanta has to beat now, right? With if they want that final playoff spot, because Union now 3 points separating them and basically 10th through 13th or something like that. So everyone chasing the Union here, and the Union could really do basically put it out of reach if they were to beat Atlanta here. But like we've talked about with Atlanta in the past couple of weeks, especially on the road, they've just been very, very stubborn on the road, not giving up too many chances, holding their shape specifically, and taking their chances when they come. But the Union have looked very, very hot recently, especially at home. Obviously, just beat up on DC. That attack is clicking with Baribo and the rest of them. Jean Jacques actually came back, featured in that game for about 25 minutes. They're holding midfielder, so that's a good sign for them defensively. But still, I think this is one where we could also see a bit of fireworks. I think Atlanta has been picking up their intensity recently, and it's just really about finishing. Jean De Silva being out really has hurt them, I think, on the wing play, but Mosquera's kind of filled in pretty decently. He scored a banger against the Red Bulls. But this is one that I think the Union should still be winning, but I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta maybe steals a point here. And it's really, this is one of those that might get cagey. Maybe that I would take an over in if it wasn't another type of situation. But yeah, just this is one where I'm seeing that it could get just a little bit ugly because of this specific way these teams are positioned right now, and the need for points, especially for Atlanta. So Atlanta would probably prefer the 3 points, but regardless, this is one that I'm not fully confident in the Union defense. So yeah, this one's kind of on the knife's edge for me, but I still think the Union do separate themselves. I think they've just been just really turning up, in this form, coming down to the playoff line, and I think they might be a tough out for some teams in the playoffs if they do obviously end up qualifying, but I think they do, and I'm going to go for a 2-1 Union win. Montreal hosting the Earthquakes. I think I said at the beginning Montreal is coming off back-to-back wins, but that's false. But they are unbeaten in their last 3, coming off the win last week to the Fire, and then they came back from 2-0 against the Revs to draw, and then before that they also got another win. So a pretty good schedule for them, favorable here. They obviously play the Earthquakes, and Earthquakes as well. Obviously they've been eliminated for quite some time, maybe not mathematically, but let's be serious, just based on most outcomes or what you would predict, they weren't going to get the points. They are 2 wins, 2 draws, and 11 losses on the road. So once again, like I said, they're really playing with house money. This is a team that I don't really want to trust in terms of any type of bet unless I'm fading them. And Montreal is not really a team I also want to trust right now. While they should be getting this win, I could see goals on both sides. It's just about the Earthquakes' motivation factor, and I don't really rate this Montreal side. I still just think they are not as talented, and that's why they're sitting in the position they're in, as well as the pieces they traded away. They have gotten good results, but that's just because of the teams they've been playing against, so it's not much I really want to look into. Obviously an impressive win against Charlotte 3 games ago, but besides that, not too much to look into. I just don't really, this is just not a spot I want to trust this team in a must-win game. This is just not a team I really want to trust. Earthquakes could play spoiler, and Abobasi is back, so it's just one the Montreal should be winning, but some of these East teams are just so bad. It's just not enough to convince me to trust them, in terms of a bet. But I am going to say Montreal gets this one done, but probably not without conceding. But that's also just uncertain as to how the Earthquakes, approach this after losing at home to St. Louis, one of the only teams as bad as them in terms of the standings, and now they have to travel all the way to Montreal. So one that's not very straightforward, but I think Montreal should get the win. I say 2-1 for Montreal. Austin hosting RSL, and there's been a lot of drama, especially with Driussi probably leaving after this season. He was suspended for a couple games ago against LAFC, where they got the draw on the road against LAFC, but then now in this Texas Derby, they go scoreless again at home. They're now 1 win, 1 draw, and 3 losses. since Leagues Cup, and in both of their home games they've been shut out. So not really good signs for a team that's still potentially in the playoff race, but I just don't think they're going to get it done, even get the points to catch up to Minnesota, even if Minnesota were to somehow consistently drop points down the stretch here. And so I think they kind of feel like they're out of it. I don't know if the motivation's there. I just think this gap is insurmountable right now. And RSL on the other end, I think they've been finding their groove, specifically attackingly. Defensively, they've still been very, very suspect. And they've given up actually 9 goals in the last 3 games while scoring 7. So it's just been fireworks on both ends for the most part. But Austin isn't a team I particularly like attacking wise. So RSL the odds are reflecting Austin still being a favorite here, but I do like RSL to probably steal it. I think they at least get a point out of this one, and they're still fighting for one of those top home playoff spots. Nothing's decided yet. I think with Chicho back as well, that could just be the difference despite maybe their defensive struggles. So I'm going to say they get the job done 3-1. Dallas hosts Orlando, and Dallas, like we talked about before their game against LAFC where they just won 3-1, they've just been hot at home. 9 wins, 2 draws, 4 losses now. But their defense has been a little bit suspect, so it's been also back and forth in their games, very high scoring for the most part. Orlando did well to try and mount a comeback against the Crew, showed a lot of resolve there, but ended up falling 4-3. They had Araujo, one of their kind of holding just box-to-box sort of midfielders, and just a key piece in that midfield, if anything. He had him suspended for that game, so he's going to be back here. And they have been beating up on the bad teams, specifically in the East, down the stretch to, like we talked about, climb up in the standings. And Dallas is, well, they're not a terrible team at the moment, but, positioning-wise, they aren't the most consistent. But at home here, where they get to stay after last week, and Orlando has to continue their travel, I do expect more goals in this one for the most part. This is one where I may be tracking just lineups because Musa, Dallas's number 9, picked up a knee-to-knee kind of injury in the last game, and the reports say he should be fine to go for this, but I do probably want to wait for lineups for this one. In terms of an additional bet for the Twitter. So make sure to look out for that. But yeah, I just think there's goals in this one. Really hard to call a side because Orlando has been also climbing up based on their home form. So very sketchy, between these teams, whether they're home or away. And Dallas, obviously, I think has a bit of an edge in this one, but I wouldn't be surprised if Orlando put up a fight. I think the points are shared in this one. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. St. Louis hosting Kansas City in the Missouri Derby. And this is going to be our third best bet, the final one. And it's the 2-unit. It's going to be a 2-legger. And we start with this game here. We're taking St. Louis team total over 1.5. And this is completely different sided for both these teams. St. Louis needs to win out to even have a chance. They could be eliminated despite them winning this game, but still they have to play as if the other teams are going to drop points. They have to just do what's in front of them, and this is obviously going to be one that both teams should get up for. But I think Kansas City on the other end has been eliminated, and they're also coming off midweek game, the Open Cup, that they put their absolute all into to almost steal, but then they lost in extra time, so that's even more minutes under their legs. They have to travel from LA for this one, back basically home, but they're in St. Louis, same state. But yeah, so this St. Louis has scored 2 in 7 out of their 9 games since basically the German signings and everyone else they brought in came in. So it's hit at a very good clip. They obviously are going to be very desperate here. This should be one that Kansas City, like I said, does also get up for, but it's also hard to question how much effort they do show after that disappointing result that they poured their all into for the Open Cup. So I'm only going to trust one side here. St. Louis could be getting both Kessler and Nilsson back potentially for center back depth, which could help their case if you want to trust them on the money line, which is basically around even or so. But I'm just going to trust them to score the 2 here, because I think if they do win, it's hard to see them holding a clean sheet against most teams, even a team as bad as Kansas City, and even in a spot like this. But regardless, yeah, we're going to trust the one side here. It's a derby anyway, so it's going to be very high intensity. St. Louis on the extra rest, and Kansas City also doubling up on the travel, doubling up on the games because of the midweek. Very emotionally in a bad place right now, so we're going to fade them for this first leg. To wrap up this 2-unit best bet, the second leg we're taking here is between Seattle and the Dynamo. We're going a goal more to get a little bit juicier, but a lot of room for error here. We're taking the under 3.5, and that wraps this up at plus 117. It's 6th versus 5th in the West, separated by just 1 point here. Seattle has just been absolutely dominant at home. If you take out their results against LAFC, like I have mentioned before, they're 9 wins, 1 draw, and 1 loss in their last 11 home games, minus playing LAFC. And yeah, that's just pure dominance. They did slip up against San Jose the other week to make it 2-2 to a very bad San Jose team. But regardless, Dynamo as well, they're a bottom 6 team in terms of expected goals. Their home form especially hasn't even been good this season, and they've had Hector Herrera out for a couple games now. He's still going to be out for about a week or maybe 2, and that's really the driving force of their midfield. It's been very they've been a little bit lethargic without him. I just don't trust their attack without him. Ponce also is dealing with a bit of an injury or fatigue, something like that. And both these teams anyways are 2 top 5 in terms of expected goals allowed. So generally chances don't come easy, and with Herrera out in that midfield, a lack of kind of left winger options for the Dynamo as well, with Aliu kind of being their only option. He hasn't looked great. I just don't see how this one turns out to be fireworks. It's also just because of the situation here that it's going to be cagey based on the points. Both these teams still in position to even, maybe slip into that 4th spot for a home playoff spot. But regardless, this is one that you just want to get away with a point at the very least, not give up too many chances. And the Sounders at home obviously have been almost untouchable. I just don't think Houston offers much, especially. And the Sounders also had a bye last weekend, and now this is going to be their 2nd home game in a row, while Houston has to continue traveling after they went and had to play against Texas in that derby. So now a West Coast trip. This just doesn't scream goals to me, and especially if Ponce's out. Kowalczyk has been a decent other option, but regardless, I think that midfield and that the even though Houston likes to have a lot of possession, it just hasn't been that successful in terms of turning that into meaningful possession and creating a lot of high quality chances. So yeah, we're gonna take that extra goal here. I think Seattle probably wins this one, if I'm being completely honest, maybe like 2-0 or something like that. But yeah, I just don't see Houston contributing in terms of goals. Seattle as well, not the most progressive and overwhelming team as well, and Houston definitely is stronger on the defensive side of the ball, especially if they have to go on the road here, and we're fighting for every point we could get. So that's going to wrap up our 2-unit best bet for the show. Fire hosting Toronto, and I didn't change this up, but this is actually going to be played at SeatGeek Stadium, not Soldier Field. So just more, obviously Fire don't really get a home field advantage most times, and obviously they have to change fields now with the Bears playing on any given week at home, like this week. So that doesn't help their cause. Both these teams actually have 3 games left, one less than most teams in that lower half of the East, and the Fire are actually sitting 7 points behind Philly now in that final spot. Their max point total can now only be 38. So if they don't win this one, considering Philly will probably, you would think, get a point. I think even if Philly doesn't get a point, if the Fire don't win out, they don't even have a chance. They'll be eliminated from contention. And once again, it's just another lost season. Kuipers has been out the past couple of games because he had a baby. and so that has hurt their attack. And I would expect them to be back for this one because it's already been 2 games, but we'll see. And then Chihos as well, one of their better center backs, has been out for a while now after picking up a knock. There hasn't been too many updates on that, so I don't know if he comes back for this one. But despite all that being said, I think the Fire are going to obviously have to be desperate here. And Toronto hasn't looked great either. They just came off a trip to the Rapids last weekend where they got held scoreless, and now a 0-0 draw midweek in the Canadian Championship. You lose that on penalties, having to go to Vancouver, and now you have to go to Chicago a couple days later. Doesn't bode well, and they just haven't been looking that prolific anyways. So I think this could be a low-scoring game. Toronto is also fighting because they have one less game left than most of these other teams chasing them for those wild card spots. So I think they're going to very much mail it in. But this is one that you really can't trust either side to deliver, with your money specifically. But I'm going to take the Fire to get the 3 points here. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see nils, to be honest. Once again, Toronto just doesn't seem to be clicking, especially on attack. And we'll see if they do any rotation because of their very hard travel recently and having to go all out in that Canadian Championship. So I say 1-0 to Chicago. Whitecaps are the Canadian champions, beating Toronto FC. Now they get to host Timbers, who are still very much in the running for, remaining in that wild card spot, or maybe even climbing up to as high as, 5th or something like that. That's literally just how tight it is. Like I said, 2 through 7 are separated by 5 points. And another, 2 points separates these teams, 7th and 8th. So Timbers on the road haven't been that great. They're also actually missing a Vander here due to suspension. So that's a big miss for them. They're they're obviously one of the main MVP candidates, and the player keeping them afloat down the stretch here. Whitecaps obviously do have that extra game under them because of the midweek game, but Timbers on the road just haven't been very convincing. And last week they did do well to get a point against RSL, but this one's also just generally hard to call. I think without Evander, you're probably going to see Moreno maybe, or Williamson playing cam with Jonathan Rodriguez, and then Anthony on the right wing. So still just kind of hard to call, and this one still should be a good one to watch. I think Stuart Armstrong is in line for maybe one of his first starts possibly, so that could be an interesting adjustment to a lineup and to see how he actually can influence the game. But I just don't see the Whitecaps losing this one at home. I think this one could be a little bit less scoring than we're used to with Timbers games specifically. Whitecaps generally aren't too bad defensively at home, and once again, everyone's fighting for this positioning. So with an extra game in hand as well for the Whitecaps, I think they'll be content with just keeping it low, eventful, and taking their chances when they get them, because the Timbers, especially on the road, probably will shoot themselves in the foot. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Whitecaps win. Thanks for tuning in once again, everyone. I really appreciate all your support and the consistent comments you guys bring. And yeah, a little bit of an interesting episode this time around with the setup here, but we're going to get back to normal ahead of the next couple videos and going forward to wrap up the MLS season, and then we get into the playoffs very, very soon. So we got another loaded slate with week 34. We got 3 best bets loaded up, and a lot of storylines still, because of all the teams still remaining to be even locked into certain positions and not just even getting into the playoffs. So West and East, still a lot to be decided, and it's going to be a lot of fun games this weekend on Saturday. Best of luck on the bets if you're tallying any of them, and on your own if you decide to go that route. Make sure to check out the Twitter or X at MLS Digest for any more information on additional bets if we make them. And just in general, we discuss MLS on there. As always, love to talk about it with you guys. So make sure to like and subscribe once again, guys. and I'll see you ahead for week 35 midweek action.